First, I'm gonna greet you all in my traditional language. So, Yat et Anotso, She Ya Yadir Kaviero Yanishia, Lok Nishlan, Ado Nakai Dashichin, Nash Ejitoba A Dashiche, Ado Nakai Dashinelin, Bidast Itzeko A de Nasham, Ado Tucson de Cashed in Agut Ego the Nest and Nishlan. So I would like to say, that as a Diné person, we have an interwoven relationship with Ek, which translates to kinship. It is how we understand our connection, not only to one another, but to the land, to all living beings, and to the responsibilities we carry. Everything and every place has a role in shaping both the present moment and the future. As a Diné person, I also ground myself through my clan introduction. In this way, this is how we locate ourselves in relationship to land, to people, and to community. I am a Reed people born from Mexican. My maternal grandfather is Zuni Edgewater, and my maternal grandfather is Mexican. I come from the Grand Canyon, and now I currently reside here in Tucson. I share this because identity, for me, is not separate from place. It is shaped by, carried through generations, and lived in relationships. And in many ways, that it is what brings us here together tonight. We come from different homelands, stories, and traditions, but we share this understanding that our identities are rooted in place through memory, culture, and the teachings carried to us and through us. These connections guide how we move through the world and how we imagine the futures with purpose and meaning. Here, where we are now gathered, we continue to honor our neighboring relatives, the Tona Atam and the Pasco Yaqui. Our relatives continue to uphold their traditional teachings and their responsibilities to this land. We recognize and honor their enduring stewardships, and that currently Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes. Everything around us, plants, animals, mountains, and waters, all hold significance and purpose. We give thanks to Nehemah Hassan, which translates to Mother Earth, and offer our gratitude to the Creator. We are trusted with the responsibility of caring for the land and all life upon it, and for honoring cultural spaces that allow our communities to continue to thrive. In our teachings, we say, Nehemah Hassan Ba'achudya Ahani Nehisalah, which translates, it is up to all of us to care for Mother Earth. Which is Egel Eya, which means it is up to us. In that same way, as we gather to reflect on the history and future of Tucson Mexicans American and Chicano Cultural Center, we are in conversation with something we already know. What it means to hold place, to create, and care for spaces that carry our stories, our struggles, and our visions for the future. Just as Native communities have long maintained relationships to land across generations, these spaces are also living expressions of memory, care, and responsibility to one another. We all know our presence and our role in this place. May we continue to reflect on the significance of where we are and carry that awareness into how we continue to support and sustain the cultural spaces and communities around us. In doing so, we help ensure that Nehemah Hassan and all of who belong to her will remain healthy for future generations. So, as we carry that shared sense of responsibility and connection and into the rest of our evening, I'd like to introduce Javier Duran, Founding Director of the Confluence Center for Creative Inquiry and Professor of Latin American and Border Studies at the University of Arizona, and who's also tonight's moderator. A native of the Arizona Sonoran Desert region, Javier's work emphasizes interdisciplinary and binational collaboration across the U.S.-Mexico border, bridging scholarship, culture, and community. He also serves on the board of directors of the Arizona-Mexico Commission, where he contributes to strengthening cross-border partnerships at both the state and regional levels. So please join me in warmly welcoming Javier.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, querida. Buenas tardes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. And first and foremost, I wanted to thank the Confluence Center team, the team that makes these things possible. Yadira Caballero, Irán Peña, Yasmin Vázquez, Alexandra Mora Medina, and Brenda Machado for their work they do at the center. A round of applause for them. I also like to thank our hosts here at the playground, and especially Leah Shortasinki, the events director, and the staff at Playground for hosting us and assisting in putting this event together. Thank you very much. So, 50 years ago, the Confluence Center became a hub for the arts, humanities, and social sciences, grounded in the belief that knowledge belongs in public places, in spaces, shaped through community dialogue and lived experience. And the Show and Tell program is one of the key ways we bring this to life. 30 years ago, at a time when downtown Tucson was silent, remember that? Nobody would come here, not even the buses. Nobody could drive because of the potholes or the construction. But we came here to the playground when it opened. And we started this series called Show and Tell. And the idea was to bring the knowledge and the work of colleagues at the university to the community and have the community come here and learn more over a drink, informally, just learning and having a conversation. And this past January, we came back here to this place, to the playground. And in that return, we had a dialogue in which community culture and shared imagination became part of the conversation. And we also took the opportunity to reconnect and create a space to have this conversation about Mexican American Chicano Cultural Center. We have Lidio Otero, Mayor Regina Romero, and Raul Aguirre. Lidia and Raul are here this afternoon with us. And we also have Kelly Wade, who is the cultural officer of the city of Tucson here, and who's been instrumental in moving this effort forward. And I want to give you a lot of credit, Kelly, for working with the community and also representing the city in this endeavor. And so the conversation, the last time we were here, emphasized that the vision of a Mexican American Chicano Cultural Center is a long-standing, grounded in generations of advocacy and creativity. This is not the first time people are trying to do this, right? But this is probably the best moment to do it. Rather than starting from zero, the focus was on building intentionally from the work already happening across the city. And it also highlighted the power of the creative economy, and that's something that people sometimes forget. Oh, we're going to have a financial crisis. Oh my God, how can we have a cultural center? Why are we putting money into culture? Well, look around. Where are we, right? Look what this place is, what downtown Tucson has become, and what Tucson is in terms of culture, right? So it is important. It is fundamentally a key component of our economy, not only our economic economy, but our cultural economy and our spiritual economy here in our communities. So ultimately, that gathering pointed to our collective vision, one that honors the past, engages the present, and builds a lasting legacy for future generations. There is a photo of some of my relatives that is circulated. And the photos were taken, one was taken here on Congress Street. At some point, they're going to come back. That was my father a cousin and an uncle walking down Congress when they used to take those photos. It's about the late 40s. There's another one of two of my uncles that came back from hunting, and they have a deer in the front of their car, and they live here on Camden Street for many years. And so, talk about playground and talk about reclaiming the spaces. My family has a long connection also with this particular space. And it has become a generational duty for many of us to reclaim that and bring it back in a very dignified and structurally sound way. So tonight's gathering invites us to reflect on the history of Tucson's Mexican American Chicano community and the generations of entrepreneurs, civic leaders, and visionaries who helped shape the city into a commercial and cultural center of the Southwest. Through their efforts, Tucson became a place defined by connection, exchange, and community presence. An enduring foundation that continues to influence how we understand the city today. And it is exactly through conversations like this that we're able to carry that legacy forward, by learning from those histories while engaging with the people who continue to shape Tucson in the present. So it's truly an honor to be joined by an incredible group of panelists this evening. First, we have Tom Sheridan, a historical environmental anthropologist who has spent decades studying the Southwest and Northern Mexico. He has been a research anthropologist at the Southwest Center and professor of anthropology at the U of A since 2003. His work, but he retired, by the way. He's going to tell you that, clarification. His work, which spans more than 50 years, has focused on ethnographic and ethnohistoric research that help us better understand the region's cultural and historical landscapes. He has also had key leadership roles, including directing the Mexican Heritage Project at the Arizona Historical Society and leading ethnohistorical research at the Arizona State Museum. Then we're going to have Betty Villegas, who brings decades of leadership and public service to this conversation, particularly in the area of housing and community development. She served for 18 years as housing program manager and director of Pima County Housing Center, where she worked to expand housing opportunities and led efforts around foreclosure prevention and protection from predatory lending. She was appointed by the Pima County Board of Supervisors in 2020 when she helped guide the community through the challenges of the pandemic. She later served as Community Housing Director of the South Tucson Housing Authority before being appointed to the Arizona State Legislature in 2023. Her experience and commitment to equitable solutions make her an important voice in addressing the challenges facing our communities today. And then, finally, we have José Jimenez, who is a longtime Tucson business owner and community leader, and the owner of Petroglyphs at Mercado San Agustin, a space that has celebrated local culture and creativity for over 26 years. He has been deeply involved in shaping Tucson's cultural and economic landscape through his service, including as a board member of the Living Streets Alliance, member of the Somos Uno Advisory Committee, and a current executive board member of the Tucson International Mariachi Conference. He also serves on the Mercado District Stakeholder and Marketing Committee, and is currently a Tucson Convention Center Commissioner representing the Mayor's Office. A round of applause for them, please. And we're going to start with Tom Sheridan, and author of a very important book of Tucson history, Los Tucsonenses. Tom.
Thank you, Javier. Okay. Thank you. Can you all hear me? Well, when Javier invited me, he reminded me that it was the 40th anniversary of the publication of Los Tucsonenses, and here is the original hardcover copy of it. And I said, thanks a lot, Javier, for reminding me how damn old I am. But what I want to do tonight is put this book in its proper context. And that is that it came out of the Mexican Heritage Project, which began in the early 80s when a group of members of the Mexicano Chicano community here in Tucson got together, went to the Arizona Historical Society and said, how come you're not telling our story? They said, we could learn about the Spanish conquistadores, in the Historical Society Museum, but there's nothing about, the next 300, 400 years. And the Historical Society answered, well, we don't have any money to give you, but we'll give you space. So people like my dear friend Patricia Preciado Martin, who has written and edited so many wonderful books about the community, the Mexicano community of Southern Arizona. Belen Ramirez, Armando Migueles, who was in the Spanish department at U of A, and Joe Noriega got together and they began to go out into the community. And they did oral histories of people in the communities. They also collected photographs, family photographs, historical photographs from people in the community, took them to the Historical Society, reproduced them, and then gave the originals back to their owners. And begun to build up, a bank of information about, Mexicanos in Tucson. And, to give voice to that community. And I was hired, I was not the director of that, the Mexican Heritage Project. I was director of one part of it, which was an NEH grant to do, historical research on the Mexican community between the Gadsden Purchase in 1854 and World War II. And so we began doing that research. I had lots of students, graduate students from U of A helping me, while Pat and Belen and Joe were out in the community gathering this, this basic information. And in a sense, the Mexican Heritage Project was a precursor of what Javier and Lydia and others are trying to do now, which was to create a body of work that recognized the important role, the critical role that the Mexicano community played in Tucson history. And as we began to do the research, it was really, really interesting to look at the major sources of historical data about the community, because even though Mexicanos remain the majority of Tucson's population until the early 1900s, 50 years after the Gadsden Purchase. By about the 1870s, if you were to read the Star or the Citizen, it's like Mexicanos were erased. And the only thing you would find in those newspapers were, two Mexicans in Barrio Libre got into a knife fight on Saturday night. So it, even though there was this vital Mexican middle-class society here, people like Leopoldo Carrillo, who started Carrillo's Gardens, Esteban Ochoa, who co-owned the largest freighting company, which meant it was the largest business in Tucson, and who also was the only Hispanic mayor of Tucson until Regina Romero. Think about that, how long. Mariano Samaniego, all of these, even though Tucson had this very active middle-class Mexican community of businessmen, of artists, of musicians, cultural institutions like Teatro Carmen, you never heard about that in Tucson's English language newspapers. Luckily, however, there were all of these Spanish language newspapers in Tucson, like El Fronterizo, which was the biggest paper in the 19th century, and then El Tucsonense, which continued publication into the 1950s. And there you could read about the businessman, Federico Ronstadt, the musicians and artists who came to Tucson and played at Teatro Carmen and other venues. And Francisco Moreno himself was on exile from the Mexican Revolution, who took up residence in Tucson. But when I took over one part of the Mexican Heritage Project, I felt that in order for the oral histories to be put in their proper context, we had to have a framework about what Mexicanos were doing and where they were living in Tucson between 1860 and 1940. And what you see in the early years was, until the Southern Pacific Railroad arrived, was the Mexican community of Tucson sort of assimilating and acculturating Anglos rather than vice versa. The few Anglo men who came to live here married Mexican women, started Mexican communities, Mexican families. But after the railroad arrived, everything changed. Capital poured into the Arizona Territory from outside the Arizona Territory. And you began to get residential segregation, with Mexicanos living west and south of downtown and Anglos living east and north. You began to get more and more occupational segregation, with most Mexicanos working blue-collar jobs, while Anglo workers began a slow but steady upward mobility. And then in the school system, in the public school system, really until after World War II, there were no Mexican teachers. Children were punished for speaking Spaniards, not only in the classroom, but also on the playground. And when we did a study of master's thesis that people in the University College of Education did, you read master's thesis about Tucson, Mexican children of Mexican heritage that ran the gamut from kind of benevolent paternalism to outright racism. And so we wanted to document that, to show that even though Tucson did have this thriving middle class, that there were all these families whose roots in the community went back 5, 6, 7 generations, long before Southern Arizona became a part of the United States. And even though Tucson was a better place to live for Mexicanos than Phoenix or a lot of other southwestern cities, it still was a segregated community where Mexicans were subject to a lot of institutional discrimination. Now, our particular study ended with World War II, because World War II was another game changer. And as we know from a lot of scholarship, it gave birth not only to the African American civil rights movement, or really kick-started that civil rights movement, but also to the Mexican and Latino civil rights movement as well. And conditions began to change in Tucson. Residential segregation weakened. There were more marriages between Mexicanos and Anglos. But we wanted to document about what life in this community was like prior to and up to World War II. but it was also a study of incredible resilience, where you had artists like Luis Espinel, who was Linda Ronstadt's great aunt, who was an internationally famous star and sang traditional canciones de Mexico and all of Latin America. You had popular giants, many call him the father of Chicano music, Eduardo Lalo Guerrero. You had this very, very vibrant community. And all of that deserves to be remembered. Because, you know, one of the things we face with people coming into Tucson and Arizona is that there are so many newcomers. Lots of them don't know that this part of Arizona belonged to Spain, and then Mexico became a part of the United States. And that story, more than ever, needs to be told, needs to be known today. So thank you very, very much. This has been, it's such a great honor to participate, even though I see I have 5 minutes left. I'd like to have more questions and answers, so I'm going to stop there.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's really good to see so many people here gathered for this conversation because that alone says it's something important. And I have to stop and say, Mr. Sheridan, you know, it's really great having you here and telling your story. I can't say I read the whole book, but I did read some chapters and heard many things about you through the years, and it's great to be here on the stage with you, knowing exactly how this book came to be. And thank you. His memory, I mean, I have to write my notes down, and you know, this guy just says it off the cuff. That's amazing. So let's give it up for Mr. Sheridan. Well, that's pretty good. It sounds pretty good. So our community cares deeply about who we are, where we come from, and what we choose to preserve for those who come after us. I want to welcome everyone into this space with gratitude because conversations like this matter. They matter not only because we are talking about the possibility of creating a Mexican-American Chicano Cultural Center here in Tucson, but because we are talking about something much deeper. We are talking about memory, belonging, identity, and responsibility. Tucson and Southern Arizona did not become shaped by Mexican American and Chicano culture by accident, as Mr. Sheridan shared with us. Our families, our stories, our labor, our traditions, our language, and our resilience helped build this region. That history lives on in our neighborhoods, our food, our music, our faith, traditions, our activism, and in the generations of people who never gave up on this community, even when their contributions were overlooked or pushed aside. For me, this conversation is also very personal because I have been part of this work for many years, along with some of the people here, like Raúl Aguirre, and Neto Portillo, and Josefina, and Cardenas, and Lydia, so many, and Raúl Ramirez. You know, we've all been working in one phase or another on this. And so I was involved early on with El Centro Cultural. How many of you remember El Centro Cultural de las Americas? Not very many of you, right? But that was the first cultural center that was created here with a group of Mexicanos that wanted to create a space for our culture. And at that point, it was not just the Mexican culture, it was all Latino cultures. And we were able to secure space at the C.O. Brown House. How many of you are familiar with the C.O. Brown House? Not very many of you. That's a house where Ben's Bells is now. I think Ben's Bells is still located, correct? Yeah. So Ben's Bells is still there. Before we at Centro went in there, it was actually a restaurant. Who remembers the name of the restaurant? What is it? El Adobes, yes, and they had the outdoor patio. So we took it over from the Arizona Historical Society, and one of the important lessons from that experience is that creating a space is only the beginning. It is not enough to open the doors and feel proud in that moment. We have to make sure the space is cared for, sustained, and kept rooted in the purpose it was meant to serve. What happened with us there is that the building was so old and there was a lot of disinvestment from the Arizona Historical Society because the state was not funding it anymore or at the level that it should be. So we were responsible for making sure that the walls didn't fall. And so rather than programming at Centro Cultural, we became focused on saving the building. We had to raise money to save the building from falling apart, and we lost our way. And at the end, Ben's Bells took it over, and they were able to come up with the money to do the repairs in the Historical Society. So the other interesting thing about the C.O. Brown House is that while it's named after the man that lived there, it was really Clara, who was a Mexican-American woman, that really kept that place up. And a lot of people don't know her history, but it's something that we need to remember, that it was the woman that really, when that building first came to be, she's the one that ran, it was a bar, I believe it was, in a boarding house. And when we were there, I have to share that we saw her presence a couple of times. We really felt her there. One day, one of the youngsters that was with us came back, and her eyes were wide, and she says, "Does anybody know who that woman is back there in the white?" And we all looked at each other and said, "There's nobody back there." And she says, "Yes, there is." So she showed herself once in a while to the youngsters, but it goes to show you that that was her space. You know, that she reclaimed that space, and she's probably still there today. Her spirit, I'm sure, is still there today. So if we don't really focus on the purpose and sustaining the building, it will begin to fall apart, and the mission can slowly drift away from the community, and that's what happened to El Centro Cultural de las Americas. But the history should not discourage us, because it should teach us. It should remind us that this work requires stewardship, accountability, and long-term commitment. I also helped lead, along with my friend Javier Duran and with Lydia Otero's help, the Cesar Carrillo House as the Mexican-American Heritage and History Museum, because I've always believed that our stories deserve a permanent and respected home in this city, not something temporary. Not something symbolic only when it's convenient, right? A real place that honors the depth of who we are and what our community has contributed to Tucson and Southern Arizona. And we should also recognize that other Arizona cities have already made public investments in this kind of vision. I don't know if you're aware that in November of 23, the city of Phoenix passed a voter-approved general obligation bond program for the purpose of creating a Latino Cultural Center. That money, today we're in 26, that money is still sitting there because they have not been able to raise the necessary money to leverage what the voters approved. And so I say we have to do it first. Because if you think about it, this is really where the culture is. You know, even when you go to, because I go to Phoenix all the time, and I'm so glad always to come home because I feel that culture. I feel that home feeling. You know, like this is where I belong. These are my people. So I say, you know, that's something that we need to think about, and we need to look at. You know, how can we raise the money to make our Mexican American Chicano Cultural Center something that we can all be proud of. And so that really matters, and you know, it shows that this is not just an idea, it is something public institutions can choose to value. If Phoenix can make that commitment, we can too. And also want to just say that, you know, I believe this conversation is so important. A Mexican-American Chicano Cultural Center must be more than just a building. It must be a living cultural space. It must be a place where history is preserved, where art and culture are celebrated, where young people can learn who they are, where elders can share their stories, and where community can gather with pride and purpose. That's how I envision a cultural center, a Mexican-American Chicano Cultural Center. It really encompasses all those things, you know, that we need in our spirits, and I hope it happens in my lifetime. And if we do this right, the benefits will be far-reaching. Culturally, it creates a permanent home for the stories, traditions, and contributions that have too often been left out or undervalued. When I was with Los Descendientes and we moved into the Sosa Carrillo house, one of the things that our elders, I'm an elder now, but our elders brought to us is a lot of documents. And when I was looking at some of those and filing some of those documents, there were stories where Mr. Sheridan talked about those oral histories. Well, I'll just use an example. Annie Lopez, I don't know how many of you know who Annie is, but they and many of her group, when she was the leader of Los Descendientes, did interviews. They interviewed people. They interviewed ball players from the leagues from way back in the days. And these stories are handwritten. These are documents that are handwritten stories. And what I was told is that the Arizona Historical Society would not accept them because they did not have a disclaimer from the interviewee. So they couldn't take those stories. So Los Descendientes has those many stories in their archives that we need to really share about some of the people that lived here, some of the people that played ball in the early days. And just for some reason that one just always sticks in my head. But it's important, you know, for our stories to be archived and stored and researched as well. You know, so educationally, it gives future generations a place to learn the truth of this region and understand that Mexican American and Chicano history is Tucson history. The community it creates, it creates a gathering place where people feel seen, respected, and connected across generations. Economically, it can support artists, educators, cultural workers, events, tourism, local businesses, and neighborhood vitality in a way that reflects our values and our identity. But again, I want to stress that if we move forward, we must move forward with care. We cannot allow this effort to become only about a structure. It has to stay focused on community. It has to have strong programming, long-term investment, and a clear vision rooted in the people it is meant to serve. We should learn from the past so that what we build now is sustainable, protected, and truly worthy of our community. I believe Tucson is ready for that conversation. I know our mayor is ready. She's very passionate about this issue. She wants to do this for us. And it shows by the staff she has put together, the research that she has done. And we have earned a place that reflects our dignity and history and our permanence in this region. So tonight I hope we think not only about what this center could look like, but about what it must stand for. It must stand for truth. It must stand for belonging. It must stand for preservation, education, and pride. And it must stand as a commitment that our culture and our history will not be treated as temporary or secondary any longer. Thank you for being part of this conversation, and I look forward to your thoughts and what you all think about this and any ideas that you may have as well. Thank you so much.
Well, you don't need me here. Thank you for coming this evening. Boy, it's going to be hard to follow in these heels, but yeah, so I'm taking the perspective based on a lot of what Betty is saying from community building and allowing for everyone in the community to participate. I own Petroglyph, which is a store in the Mercado district, and not only that district is special in that there's 37 locally owned businesses, most of the majority which is owned by minority and women, and it is a creative, dynamic space with people full of energy, and I see that kind of going across a center like this in a smaller way. I'd like to believe, I mean, in many ways our businesses there are micro businesses, but the ability for even smaller businesses to exist and to be successful and allow people to have a high quality of life. And when I look at the center, allowing for space, allowing for instruction, allowing for the teaching of process is something that I think would be important. If you look across the town, there's so much creativity and so much energy that moves across it, from murals to musicians to chefs. And there's so many people that care about so many different aspects to create who we are. But as I move forward, as I look at the future of even my own business, as I look at people who are trying to come up, I see that the resources are becoming more and more transactional. I see that space is getting harder and harder to reach and access in an affordable way. And but there is so much richness in being small, and I think small is worthy. And a center like this can not only exhibit those stories, but help grow those stories and expand them, and allow for the quality of life of Tucsonenses, but also help the city be this dynamic place. I'm on the front lines by being in the Mercado. 85% of my business every single day is brand new. That area, whether we like it or not, is so dependent on tourism. And I mention that because the reason people come to Tucson, or what changes their mind about Tucson, is the people. It is the culture. It is the food. It is the music. They land here, I think, not totally understanding, and as they move through the town, and I hear their testimonies every single day of what an amazing, dynamic place this is. And I attribute it to the abundant ecosystem, which is the Sonoran Desert. We have a absorbed that over time. We have survived it over many, 250 years, and actually 42 to 4,500 years. And it is, we who are from here have learned to live, to survive, but most of all, be creative and work in harmony with the land. And I see a center like this being something that can thrive and be alive and be full of energy and be full of culture. And it just has so much possibility. That's all I have.
Well, we have plenty of time for comments and questions, but I think it's also important to remember something that Betty mentioned, and it is that this culture is not transient, temporary, or it's been here for a long time. And my colleague Yadira's comments at the beginning of this conversation reinforce that fact that we've been in communities for many years. When we're talking about the Mexican, American, and Chicano experience, we also have to think about the other communities in which we also became members of those communities, and we have created this interconnection that it wasn't only historical or demographic, but also economical, social, cultural, and to this day, we're also looking at those possibilities to reclaim and bring back some of those spaces, right? And if you look at the cultural agenda right now in Tucson, you're going to see a lot of activity that reflects some of those efforts. So it's something that it's happening right now. And I also want to just remind people to think about how many times we're going to be told that there is a crisis, and yet at the end of the day, people of cultural space is what remains, right? So we need to remain strong in this quest for creating this space, and that's something that our communities have, the resilient spirit of being here and not going anywhere, because we're from here needs to be part of that.
Panelista, muchas gracias. Great job. And we'll let you know about the next show and tell sometime this summer. Hay que seguir la conversación. Gracias de nuevo y vamos a seguir en la lucha. Buenas noches. Gracias.